All right, we are live. Thank you so much for making the trek over here. I know it wasn't
Thank
too
you.
far today,
No,
but
not bad.
it's another very interesting day here in Washington. It's raining
Mhm.
and
A normal day?
normal day. If it ain't raining, we ain't training. So why don't we start with you giving me what it was like for you in your childhood years that led
Okay.
up to you joining the military?
Okay. My dad was in the Navy. I was born in a naval
Ooh
hospital
yeah.
and born at Naval Hospital Bethesda. Went from there to New Orleans to San Diego, which is the first recollection I have of most things because I think we got there when I was 4, maybe.
Hmm.
Lived there until I was in second grade. Moved to Annapolis, Maryland. Um, and I did second grade through 10th grade there. And then we moved to Orlando, Florida when my dad retired. Um, I thought that I had a pretty good childhood, but after going through Warrior Path, I realized there were some areas that were pretty effed up
Mm,
in terms of um, I know now there's a thing called an ACEs, Adverse Childhood Event Scale,
okay.
and I meet 4 of the 13 criteria that would lead one to think that I would develop post traumatic stress in later years.
Okay. And so that's a scale that
Mhm.
is
Right.
used normally with your program as well, correct?
We don't use it in our program. We
Okay.
make slight reference to it, but it's a well accepted score, if you will, in child psychology and in the practice of pediatrics.
Okay.
And I didn't find out about it till I went to Warrior Path and realized that divorce and abandonment and physical abuse and alcohol use amongst a parent, drug abuse amongst a parent are all things that set one up to maybe not have such a good adulthood
Mm.
because of what they went through.
Yeah, I know that childhood trauma is a very serious issue, especially
Absolutely.
they're doing a really good job of recognizing what it is in
Right.
today's. And I often hear that people are becoming weak in this day and age. I believe that to a certain extent, but
Mhm.
in another way, we're becoming stronger by recognizing these areas
Right.
of weakness where we can tune in and say, okay, why are we not as strong in this area?
Right.
Oh, it's probably because you had some fucked up stuff happen to you when you were a
Absolutely.
kid, right? It's
Absolutely.
not. It's probably not because you are overly emotional.
Right.
You just weren't taught to how to handle these experiences.
Right. And I would tell you that I think I was a happy child. I think that I had what I wanted when I wanted. We weren't affluent by any stretch of the imagination. I would say we probably lived just above the poverty level.
Mhm.
But I mean, I don't have all those good memories of vacations and having all the stuff I wanted. But I think I was a happy child. And now looking back, it's like, yeah, maybe it wasn't so happy. Maybe it was just that's all I knew.
Okay. All right. So, what was it that drove you to join the beautiful United States military? There's so many ways it's been described. I don't think beautiful has ever been one of them.
Well, so my dad was in the Navy,
Hmm.
and from about 8th grade, that's all I ever wanted to do because I saw what my dad was doing. He worked in electronics, and he got to go to sea, and he was traveling all the time, and I thought that's what I'm going to do. So I joined the Navy when I was a senior in high school in the delayed entry program, and 6 days after high school graduation, I was in boot camp. Um, and that's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to be like my father. And then when I discovered things about my father in my adulthood, I thought, no fucking way I want to be like my father. But I had him as a role model because I believe role models can be positive and negative.
Mm,
And I kind of got from him what not to do.
I like that. I like that a lot because one of the things that is reminded to me that there's lightness and darkness in all of us, and we
Absolutely.
we can choose what to show.
Hmm.
One of my favorite Harry Potter quotes. I know I grew up in Harry Potter world, so it's my whole generation. When he
Sure.
was 11, I was 11. So as the
Okay.
books progressed, I learned more. And one of my favorite things about Sirius Black said it in the third book, or in the fifth book. You're not a bad person, Harry. You're a good person who bad things have happened to.
Right. Absolutely.
And
And
it
I
reminded
believe
him
that.
he's got a choice.
I
Yeah,
believe that. Absolutely.
awesome. So you joined the Navy,
Hmm.
going to boot camp 6 days after high school is over. I remember joining the Navy in the delayed
Sure.
entry program 6 days
Okay.
after, not 6 days after high school. I waited 3 months.
Okay.
But wow, culture shock. Didn't know
Yeah.
what I was gonna walk into.
Yeah. Yeah.
First, I never knew that joining the military you were gonna see so many dicks. That's the first thing I said. The first thing I never knew that was gonna happen. I never knew that that people joined the military having no home. I never
Yeah.
knew that people left because there was literally nothing else in their hometown
Yeah.
to experience, and you want to see, you know, the entire, obviously the sea, but the
Hmm.
world, right?
Right.
And you want to experience life. People join for schooling. People join for so many reasons. What are some of the ones that you recognize?
Mostly because, well, the Vietnam War was hot and heavy when I was in high school. I graduated high school in 1974,
Mm.
and all of the stuff I ever saw on the evening news was Vietnam, 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 and the space race. And I knew I wasn't smart enough to be an astronaut, so I thought I'll be a Marine. And I told my dad I wanted to join the Marine Corps, and he said, not on my signature, you're not.
Mm.
If you're going to join the Marine Corps, you're going to wait till you're 18. And I think I realized, but I didn't know it then, but I see it now, that I couldn't wait till I was 18 to get out of the house. I was 17 when I went to boot camp.
Mm.
And if I'd have waited till I was 18, you know, who knows what I'd have been doing. So it kind of didn't really force my hand, but I realize now looking back that it was the best thing to do. It was the only thing I could do. Um, I never took any of the college entrance tests. I never had any eye to go to college. And I just thought, you know what? I got to get out of this house because it is, looking back, it was toxic.
Yeah, I think it's good. It's good to recognize what's not
Yeah.
good for us and how to progress out of there. So you are joining in the middle of what's known as one of the most an extremely violent encounter.
Right.
There's
It was near the end, but it
it was
was
near the end.
still, I mean, I remember from 8th grade through 11th grade seeing that on the news every night and hearing it and seeing the anti-war demonstrations.
Yes.
And I thought, you know, that's for me. Not the demonstrations and all that, but I thought that's what my dad did. He was a World War II, Korea and Vietnam veteran.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, I thought that's what I'm supposed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we look at people who we not necessarily idolize, but you find things that you want to be
Right.
from a little bit of everybody, and
Right.
that's how we create who we
Mhm.
are in the near future,
Right.
and you know, it's how we set goals as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize a lot of things that I wanted to be for my stepdad. He was in the Air Force. Rest, bless his soul, poor guy. He listens to the rest of these where I rag on him all the time. But today I'm gonna say one thing positive. Him showing me pictures as he experienced the world,
Mm-hmm.
and then him being activated when 9/11 happened, and him
Sure.
going overseas, and him losing friends, and
Sure.
him going through the process of not necessarily being that guy who sits in an office desk like the rest of the guys in the Air
Right.
Force, but a guy who is out there and
Right.
you know, he's really out there deployed with different
Yeah.
groups and doing crazy things and experiencing real things that he was able to come back and say, you know what, I did my part in this thing.
Right.
And I don't want to speak for him, but I can say that we all experience things in the military service that we don't anticipate seeing ever. Like,
Right.
what were some that
Right.
you saw?
Well, I ended up working and serving in military medicine for 44 years, and as a hospital corpsman in the Navy, um, and the Naval Reserve, and a Navy Nurse Corps, active and reserve, and then as an Air Force nurse anesthetist, putting people to sleep, and um, I think some of the things that I saw that I experienced in Haiti, which is 2 hours from Miami, and it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere at the time, and seeing all the filth and the diseases that you would never see in this country, even in Appalachia, you would never see some of the stuff we saw in Haiti, and then the horrible, terrible conditions that people lived in Afghanistan. And for me, it got to the point where at the end of my career, when I was in Afghanistan, it was like, you know, doing anesthesia in Afghanistan and doing anesthesia back in the United States, it's the same, just no one's trying to kill me every day when I'm here in the United States. People tried to kill me every day in Afghanistan. I saw both here and deployed. I saw horrible burns, unfortunate, things like an 8-year-old kid taking an RPG to the hip. An 8-year-old Afghan girl burned with white phosphorus. And I mean, just some horrible, horrible shit. Um, but it was at the same time, every time I saw something like that, it was empowering to me to be able to help people. And it was enriching to me because now I have some experience that I can take forth with me, irrespective of what the wounds were, irrespective of what the disease process was. I could learn something from every single patient. And then what I do for this patient, I can take forward to the next patient and do a better job.
And I think that's so important. For me in my current career field with elevators and escalators, when I learn how to troubleshoot something that I might get stuck on for a while, or this escalator is completely jacked up to beyond belief, and um, trying the same thing and it's not working. You're trying different things, it's not working. You're stuck. You're spinning your wheels, trying to figure out how to stop this escalator from stacking up anymore, destroying itself. It eats people if it's not done properly without the safety things, right? So trying to stop it from harming other human beings like myself or me when I'm working on it.
Right.
And then next thing I know, I'm able to solve it because of experience I had from a different time. And I think that we can compare that to any career field almost.
Absolutely. I look at all the people that come through Warrior Path, and irrespective of what they did, they stepped up and they served. And I don't care if you were a clerk, a cook, a medic, an intel guy, a pilot. We all served, and we all have our traumas. And you and I could go through the exact same incident and have two completely different responses to it. And it might be based on how long it lasted, how horrible it was, or what we brought to the table in the first place.
And then we also take into account fog of war.
Yeah.
And what else? How your brain. I think it's really interesting how the brain tries to naturally block out things that might hurt us.
Yes.
Emotionally or mentally, or might remind us of a past time.
I agree.
I think it's almost like how the body tells us don't work out because it's hard.
Right.
Or anything to avoid difficult things or painful things, which is why it's so dangerous to work in the age of technology right now.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I think I've heard a couple of other people say this. When I was in Afghanistan and when I was in Haiti and working with all those horrible issues that I worked with, I was never scared once because I'm doing my job. I'm saving lives. It was 3 hours later when I was in my hooch and I'd sit down on the edge of the bed and I'd feel the tears welling up. And sometime I would cry my eyes out.
Yeah.
Because of what I'd just seen in the operating room. But when I was in the operating room, as the senior anesthesia provider there at that facility, it's like, oh, I can't let him see me cry. I can't let him see me be emotional. I can't let him see that this stuff is tearing me up on the inside. So I bottle it all up, or I shove it in my rucksack and I carry it with me until I can get rid of it. And then unfortunately, it's like, okay, I go to my hooch, I sit down, I'm like, oh God, I feel these emotions welling up. There goes the trauma page, or we got another trauma coming. So you bottle it right back up and go right back in.
I know that a good comparison to what you're talking about, it's shown by Hollywood, and I don't think it's ever been shown in a good way, except for the movie Act of Valor, when the narrator says, we're men of boxes, in a letter to the guy's son. We're men of boxes. Compartmentalization can be a very, very useful tool. I also think it can be exceptionally damaging if you don't unpack those boxes within a good amount of time, because if you keep putting up boxes up in the attic, eventually you're going to forget what's in them, and then it's going to hit you like a ton of bricks. I know that me going through childhood photos, sometimes I get super excited or happy or laugh because I forgot that even happened to me. And the same thing can happen with bad memories or bad experiences.
Right.
So working in I wouldn't even call it a semi-permissible environment. I would call it a non-permissible environment, like Afghanistan or Iraq, or any country that's being ripped apart by war, by sex trafficking, by drugs, by fueling other countries' pharmaceutical industries, by anything like that. There's always going to be standout moments where everything's good,
right,
and it's not all bad.
Right.
What are some of those for you?
I would, boy, the hair just stood up on the back of my neck. Two in particular. One was from Haiti, and there was a 10-year-old kid named Mark who was burned when a pot of boiling water got on him, and I think if we hadn't been there, he probably would have died of infection. But they brought him into our hospital. We debrided his wounds. We were not allowed to keep people overnight, so we sent him out and had him come back in the next day. And we did that for days and days and days. And we debrided his wounds, and he started looking better. And this kid was always happy, always happy, irrespective of the pain that we were inflicting on him because we had to. And after he was discharged from our care, I think about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks later, he came back, and through a translator, he said, "Thank you for saving my life. You gave me my life back." From a 10-year-old kid who lives in squalor, who has one change of clothes, who has maybe doesn't even have shoes. It's raining all the time. He's walking and living in mud and eating God knows what. We saved his life, and he thanked us for that.
Wow.
And then in Afghanistan, there were 3 cases that I did that I felt really, really good about. They were not related to the war at all, which is kind of cool, because one of them was a 13-year-old girl who had a disease called echinococcus, which is a disease that's rare here in the United States, in North America, but prevalent in third world countries where there's a lot of agriculture and animals. And so it's a fecal oral transmitted disease that sequesters in the lung. And we had a thoracic surgeon in Afghanistan who decided, after he looked at her x-ray, and I don't even know why she came into the hospital, he looked at her x-ray and he said, we can resect that. We can remove that. And so we waited for a day when there were no troops in contact. Nobody was out on missions. And it's like, okay, we're going to gather all of our resources and do this. And we resected her lung. And 3 or 4 days later, she's walking, she's breathing normal. It's like, oh my God, look what we did in this shithole of a country. Look what we did.
Oh, yeah.
And then there was Special Forces brought in a kid who was 16 hours old. And it was interesting that they brought him in from a remote village, and he had all the makeup on. His family had decorated his face to celebrate his birth, but his abdominal contents were in a little sack on the outside of his abdomen at 16 hours old. And at the time, I absolutely hated doing anesthesia on kids. But we had a fantastic Air Force pediatric surgeon there named Colleen Fitzpatrick. And she said, we can fix this. It's a chip shot as far as the anesthesia goes, or as far as the surgery goes. And I'm thinking, well, it's a fucked up case as far as the anesthesia goes, because we're not equipped to do 16-hour-old kids here.
Oh, no.
But my partners and I got together and we came up with a plan, and we resected that kid's abdomen, sewed him back up, and, who knows? Hopefully he had a great, wonderful life. Those kinds of cases, those are really kind of cool to do, because it's not somebody that got blown up by an IED. It's not somebody that took an RPG. It's not somebody that has shrapnel in the middle of their brain, those kinds of things. And those are the cases that really made me feel good about what we were there doing, because we were doing our little part of, the old cliche, win the hearts and minds.
I was about to bring up hearts and minds. I think having a good relationship with people who aren't trying to shoot at you in a place where people are trying to shoot at you can be a good thing.
Absolutely.
And we can all do great things in life when we work together our resources. I might not have all the that's kind of a reason why I started doing this podcast thing, because I never, it's like, I don't even want it to be about me. I want it to be about the experiences that we can have when we really work together and do great things. And I love that you were able to do that. And, say, what, screw the rules. Let's throw caution to the wind. Hey, walk out for 10 minutes and come back in, or do whatever you have to do to make it work. That is the type of human ingenuity and compassion, one of the great things that tie us together. We don't have to be all separated. It's like in today's day and age, one of my favorite things to do is to talk to random people or just neighbors about their life experiences. And I always learn something.
Yeah. And I think you can learn something from every situation, even repeated situations. And if any of my 3 kids are here who are now 28, 33, and 38, if you ask them, what's your dad's favorite saying, he's going to say, I know, make every day a school day. And for me, that's learning something or relearning something every day. And it might be relearning that, oh, that's fucked up, I don't want to do that again. But at least I have that in my memory, and I can pull it up to say, danger, don't go there. And that's a school day.
That is a school day.
And learning something from every, when I first got into anesthesia, I thought, or before I even thought about it, I would think, well, you go into the operating room and you put somebody to sleep and they take out the appendix, and one appendix is like the next appendix, which is like the next appendix. But when it's a 4-year-old kid having their appendix out, or a 30-year-old who has some other weird disease having their appendix out, it's two completely different patients. And it didn't take me long to realize that every single patient who shows up that has the same malady, they're a different person. They're a unique person, and they bring something different to the table.
Everybody is different, and every body is different.
That's a great way to put it.
The different pronunciation of it really is something I always preach to people when it comes to fitness.
Yeah.
I might have a fast metabolism. I also work out every day.
Yeah.
And I also do things that are good for me. I don't like eating a bunch of sugars or anything like that.
Right.
So my body's going to respond differently to things. If I go drink a 12-pack of Coca-Cola, I'm probably going to have the worst stomach sickness the world's ever seen.
Right.
But someone who, if I drink alcohol with sugar in it, I'm going to have probably a hangover or something like that.
Yep.
Versus somebody who is used to it.
Right.
They have a higher tolerance of things. And I think that same thing can happen from situations that might seem traumatic to us, or might be traumatic to people that aren't as battle hardened. Right. And I think a part of being battle hardened is understanding when to hit that button on the back of the pressure cooker, let out that steam every now and then. You got to blow off some steam.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I think a lot of my colleagues in the medical field, the more they do and the older they get, the more compassion fatigue I saw. And especially with COVID, the compassion fatigue was just like through the roof. And I pride myself on my last day of doing anesthesia. I can still feel for the patient. I can sit down and hold their hand. I can cry with them if they get a bad diagnosis. I never lost that capacity for compassion. And I think that's what, unfortunately, was one of those things that just kept piling up. As you said, putting them in the boxes in the attic or putting them in the rucksack. And occasionally that rucksack just gets so fucking heavy that you can't stand up.
Slip on some shit and bust your knee wide open.
Yep.
Ugh. And that can hurt. And that hurts. I've been there. It sucks. So what are some of the things that you enjoyed doing when you were in country to kind of decompress, to blow that whistle? I mean, a lot of people don't have a lot of things.
Right.
Even in boot camp, to mess around and bullshit, we'd play sock hockey.
Yeah.
With the brooms and the socks.
Yeah.
And you would not believe how many random people from the hood in Detroit are good at sock hockey. Okay, I just want to put that out there. What are some of the things you do to decompress?
Because of the nature of what we did and always being on call, there wasn't a lot. There were, of course, Afghanistan, there were no excursions. You couldn't go out and visit the country. But in Haiti, there were. But one of us always had to stay back. And in Haiti, I've never played golf, but they had a golf course there. And because one of the drug gangs owned part of it, it was only a 13-hole golf course. And I went out there with my partners who were golfers, and I carried the M4 and I carried the M9. I mean, like, I've never shot either of those off of the range, but I was a security element just to get out and get some fresh air. And so I think one of the things that has stuck with me is spending time in nature. And nature can be wherever you go to find it. All these little community pocket parks around here. I love to go sit in places like that. And so that translated for me the ability to find beauty, if you will, or to find serenity in a place that is totally fucked up. In Afghanistan, I walked. I got there and rode in a vehicle from the airfield to the hospital, and 183 days rode back to the airfield and left. Everything else, I was on my feet. And I would walk up and down the main road just, to walk 3 miles. And I would chat up people, and I would look at the trees, and I'd look at the poppies, and they had a rose garden there at Bagram. And sometimes I would walk the perimeter, and they had a junkyard. And there were some old Soviet airplanes and some of our MRAPs and all this stuff, just all this crap that had been blown up in the junkyard. And I'd stand there and I'd in my head, I'd make up stories about how that happened. And it's
Mm.
just like, get away from the operating room, get away from all the terrible shit you see for, 6 to 12 to 18 hours a day, and just get out, get some fresh air, and relax.
One thing that I remember hearing from firefighters and police officers that or have like that I've met over time in life, and something I gathered from all of them is you're never responding to a positive thing as a first responder,
Right.
as a trauma surgeon or any type of medical staff. Usually, in a country where there's war going on,
Right.
you're going to see some gruesome, scary, real, raw, emotional, impactful things.
Right.
And it's probably not going to be a great experiences for a lot of it. You can make it a great experience, but a lot of times it isn't because they're walking in that way.
Right.
And so one thing I remember is that how you have to find your victories throughout the time. What are some of your victories?
I probably the best victory that I can think of was a 6-year-old Afghan girl who, in an exchange of gunfire between the Taliban and the French army, in and around her village, she had a piece of shrapnel probably about the size of a quarter in her brain.
Oh,
And they brought her into Bagram, and she was probably, I don't know, most of the time in that country she would have died.
yeah.
Here in the United States, bring her in, save her, get her quickly. Well, our neurosurgeon just happened to be a pediatric neurosurgeon, of all things, in Afghanistan. Um, and we took her into the operating room. I put her to sleep. He opened up her head. He pulled out this big piece of shrapnel. And I have a great picture on my phone somewhere of the blood bags. I gave her, for her weight, I don't remember what it was, but she was 6 years old. So think about a 3 or 4 year old here because of malnourishment and short stature. She's probably like a 3 or 4 year old here in the United States. So whatever that blood volume is, I replaced it 3 times in the course of her procedure. And we were all thinking, well, maybe we saved her life, maybe we didn't, who knows? And what's her life going to be like anyway as an Afghan girl who can't go to, anyway, all of that
Taliban
political bullshit
Yeah.
aside. 8 days later, she walked out of that hospital with a smile on her face.
Wow.
And I still have a picture of her walking out of the hospital. And I'm sure if I'd have turned the camera on myself, my face would have been red, my eyes would have been red, I'd have been crying tears of joy, because that was one of those things where, look what we did. Absolutely, look what we did. We saved a kid's life who, if it had been 20 miles further out, she would have died. And so I love those kinds of moments. I love those, like you said earlier, if we're trying to win the hearts and the minds of the people who aren't trying to kill us, it's an easy thing to do. Well, relatively easier. It's not always easy. But that for me was a great victory. And from my time in Haiti, we saw, in the 4 months we were there, we treated 29,000 patients. And a lot of these patients came down out of the hills and they'd never seen a Western medical provider. And, you pull teeth or you treat them for worms or whatever. And it's, for us, things that are inconsequential or small consequences, but for them it's life changing. And that's a really good feeling. So to be a military medical provider in a country that's just fucked up, you can find those small victories.
I love that. Before we continue, I want to just let you know that here at Off the Deep End Podcast, we do talk about some things that can be extremely triggering for some of the listeners, whether it's domestic violence, suicide prevention, mental health resources, vet resources, veteran stories, active shooters, fitness, and even recovering from addictive substances. There's only one place I go to spread my message of positivity about not just going through things, but growing through them as well. For this, I use Anchor.fm. It allows my listeners to listen on over 7 platforms with a click of a button. Make sure you download Anchor app or go to Anchor.fm to get started sharing your story. So I know that one of my favorite things about the medical staff in the military is not just their can-do attitude, but it's the what can I do attitude. They don't sit there and meander when there's work to be done. When there's when someone's brought in with whatever situation is going on with them. I'm not going to act like I'm a medical superstar.
Right.
Grey's Anatomy is not going to save the day today. I'm not going to put that out there. But um, from any experience, we see Hollywood portray it pretty wildly. I
Mhm.
know that some people, some of my good friends who are in different units. I'm not going to go into detail and stuff like that, but they've seen people with their face half blown off,
Mhm.
still in gunfights
Right.
against U.S.
Right.
soldiers and Marines and all the rest of them out there. Not the Coast Guard.
Mhm.
So I had to say it. We're the Navy. But what is one of the craziest scenarios you've seen as far as how many bullets some being can take and still be operating normally? Because I know that it matters where the bullets enter the
Right.
body. It matters whether it's a through and through.
Right.
It matters if any arteries get clipped.
Right.
All major organs.
Yeah.
It all kind of
Yeah.
envelops. But
Um, that's hard for me um, to answer it because I was in the operating room, and
mhm.
so, but I mean, I also worked in emergency rooms, and seeing people come in, and I think is it an adrenaline? Is it a brotherhood thing? Is it a patch me up, doc, and send me back out? I got to be out there with my Marines. I mean, I've seen that countless times, and people saying you know leg partially amputated, traumatically amputated, and it's like, put my boot back on and send me back out. And,
Wow.
you can't do that. You just can't do that. And for me, and I'm not, I don't mean this maliciously, maybe more with candor, is I'm going to start an IV on you. I'm going to get you feeling better. And then you give them some ketamine, you give them some Dilaudid, and it's like, okay, now they're resting, now they're relaxing, and now they're maybe realizing that I'm hurt a little too much to go back out.
Yeah.
I've seen it with people who are burned, and not so much with the penetrating trauma, but with the blunt trauma.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, with body armor, the wounds to the chest and the abdomen aren't near as bad as they were in Vietnam. It's more limb injuries and indirect things like the IEDs and the RPGs and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I can imagine it being kind of unworldly. I mean, not in the medical field, but
Right.
to someone who on the outside looking in,
Yeah.
seeing somebody who's literally has pieces of hot metal that was flying at them in their body,
Right.
saying, "I'm good. Just pull them out. Let's go."
Right.
Like
Right.
I got shit to do. My
Yeah.
boys are out there,
Right.
or your
Yeah.
girls, whoever.
And I think that would be mostly a frontline, a combat medic with a small unit.
Mhm.
From my perspective at Bagram, it's like they get wounded, and yeah, they may be to me within an hour, but they've already gone through two other echelons of
Okay.
care. So they had the unit medic, and then they went to a battalion aid station, or a air army fast team. And because of air superiority and helicopters, you send a helicopter out there to fob Shank, and you can pick up a guy and have him back at our place, in 15 minutes, and he's on the operating table, within an hour and 15 minutes of getting wounded.
Which is why medevacs are so important.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I love those guys. They were absolutely amazing.
I know that a couple movies have portrayed what medevacs are like. You have a crew inside the back of the Black Hawk or whatever aerial vessel
Right.
is transporting these people, and they're constantly working on somebody in the air.
Absolutely.
I haven't been able to speak to anybody that has done that. Is it difficult when all that wind is going through?
Well, they've got the doors closed, but I think the vibration,
The vibration.
and I looking back, I would say probably half of the patients that we took off of helicopters already had a good running IV, and whether that IV was put in the field or at a aid station or in the helicopter didn't matter. It was a big IV and it was running well. And then I'm going to say probably half of the patients that I took directly from casualty receiving into the operating room already had a breathing tube in. So the paramedics or a trauma surgeon or somebody that had breathing tubes and a laryngoscope with them were able to get those people intubated and start the process of the resuscitation long before they got to me, which for me was a blessing. And I'm thinking, thank God for people like me when I was younger as a hospital corpsman, the combat medics, the 18 Deltas, the Air Force PJs. Thank God for those people, because we had a 96% survival rate of coming into our operating room, irrespective of what your wounds were. Um, I can't imagine what it would have been like if I hadn't had those first and second echelon care people out there. And so, I love what we did, and I love the fact that we saved lives. And I would tell you that it didn't start with me. It started with point of injury. So, maybe some uh, specialist who's on his first deployment and is maybe his third month of deployment, and he does the right thing because of his training, and he does the right thing because those are his brothers and sisters out there with him, and he knows that if I do the right thing, my brother's going to live. We're going to send him back to another echelon of care, but I'm doing the right thing because of my training and because he's my brother.
Do you think that training directly results in the ability to combat stressful situations?
Absolutely. And I think we do a lot of it by menu, and I equate it to field stripping and cleaning and reassembling your weapons. There's steps involved. And having been an enlisted guy, when I got to anesthesia school as an Air Force nurse, Air Force officer, I had that menu driven aspect to my mind, so that I'd go into the operating room just to routinely put somebody to sleep. And I had, you do this first, you do this, you do this, you do this. Terribly menu driven. And I think that's not a bad place to be, because that's what the menus give you, the attention to detail, and the attention to detail is what saves lives.
Excellent. Because I know that for me, dealing with something like unwrap, where you have two vessels traveling alongside and you're transferring fuel, bombs, whatever, the mail, a lot of people's food, a lot more food, so much food. 5,000 people on a ship, right? We all eat 3 times a day. It's a lot of food. So, and I remember one of my favorite memories, in the middle of unwrap, I'm the POIC of that station, the rig captain. So I'm running my crew on station 19, and I see a thing of apples from Washington State, and I saw they were from Wenatchee. And so I ran over to the box as soon as it hit the deck, before they could drag it out of the way.
Yeah.
I grabbed my knife, sliced open the pallet, the box on the pallet, yanked out one of these apples, and dug my face into it as fast as I could. And then I grabbed a couple more, and I was eating apples from my home state while I was just off the coast of Iraq.
Yeah.
Before we entered back in our OAR to drop more bombs. Yeah. So I was just laughing, but being able, I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that, or safe doing it, or I wouldn't have the tenacity or irresponsibility to do that if I didn't know and have the responsibility of dialing in with my crew before that, with our training, understanding what different nomenclature does, how what it shouldn't do, knowing what not to do is so important. So training was so important for having a cool, calm, and collected mindset versus not. When shit went wrong, I had to have a cool, calm, and collected mindset. When we had to shoot when they our vessel giving us fuel, giving us all these things, had to shoot the shot line or the high line, connecting our two ships because everything failed on their side because they're old piece of shit ship. We had to know what to do. I had to know where to stand to pull something and watch over 1,000 feet of synthetic nylon, a bunch of really, really old 8x19 wire rope go flying and smash the non-skid and freaking zip line whip off the side of our ship. If anybody was in the way, they would have been dead. It would have severed them. And once you start bleeding from that for more artery, it ain't really good. What is one of the moments where training could be better in the medical field? What is something that you wish you had been taught before you got into an area where you really needed it?
That's a hard one, because we are so specialized in medicine now, not just military medicine, in medicine, that I know my responsibility to a T. But it's all my responsibility also impacts the orthopedic surgeon. It impacts the operating room nurse. And I kind of know their, not menus, but I kind of know their responsibilities for the overall, and I can help them out. But I don't know that there's really, I don't feel like I was unprepared for anything that showed up in Afghanistan.
Excellent.
And I will also tell you that in 1982, when I graduated from nursing school, I went to a very small school in southeast Oklahoma, and from there I went to Parkland Hospital in Dallas, which is where John F. Kennedy died. But hopefully they're known for better things than that, and one of those things is the Parkland burn formula, that is a internationally known and recognized and accepted formula for resuscitating burn patients. Okay, I learned that in 1982. I worked in the burn unit for about 6 weeks during my residency, and then maybe I had one or two burn patients ever in my entire career after that, until I get to Haiti, and the surgeons manage that. Then I get to Afghanistan, and I remember one day that was probably one of those 6 or 8 shittiest of shitty days.
Mm.
And there were 2 Marines that were brought in that were horribly burned, and the trauma surgeon was in another room, and the ortho surgeons were working on these burned kids, and a plastic surgeon, and uh, it clicked for me, the Parkland burn formula. So from 1982 to 2009, I had not used that burn formula, but that day it clicked, and I knew 4 milliliters per kilogram per percent of body. I still remember it. It's amazing to me that those things that you do over and over and over again, irrespective of what your job is. Typing a form, you know what goes in which box on the form. That's perfect, because you're doing your job. Up to and including resuscitating patients, including taking out Taliban, your weapon systems. You got to know your weapon system. And for me, the weapon system was providing comfort during surgery. So, I mean, it's not a weapon system, but you get my drift.
Yeah.
Everything,
tool of the trade.
Yeah, my tool of the trade, my weapon system, my go-to served me very well. And it's like that day, at the end of that day, and it was a horrible fucking day. The end of that day, I went back to my hooch. I'm like, God damn, I remember the Parkland burn formula. And it's been, 27 years since I learned it. So that was, that to me, at the end of my career, told me that the things I've done, the things I've witnessed, the things I've learned all go in to get me where I am today. And I am at the peak of my profession because of my training, because of that stuff I learned even in boot camp. I remember in the Navy, they had this book called The Basic Military Requirements.
Oh, yeah.
And we all got handed that the first day of boot camp. And I can remember the company commander telling us, open your, he was a machinist mate, small boat guy from Vietnam. So he's talking like this. All right, dickheads, open up the book to page whatever,
Yeah.
And there's a picture of a ship that's just, the superstructure is just blown to smithereens. And the caption said, the result of carelessness. And he said to us, if you turn a valve the wrong way in the engine room, you're going to blow up the ship and kill your shipmates. And for me, at 17 years old, that put the fear of God into me. Well, in 2009, after I came back from Afghanistan, my wife and I took a trip to Hawaii, and I'm going through the Museum of the Pacific over there, and there's that picture, that same exact picture, and it said the result of a kamikaze attack. I'm like, this son of a bitch lied to me. He told me it was the result of carelessness, turning that valve the wrong way.
Oh,
but
man.
You know what, Eddie? That stuck with me every day of my career because it's attention to detail.
It is essential.
Absolutely.
It's life or death.
And for me, attention to detail is if I give the wrong dose of something, if I give too much or too little, somebody could die.
Mm.
Or if I give the wrong fluid, somebody could die. Or if I don't pay attention to their allergy band on their wrist that says they're allergic to penicillin, and I give them something that's penicillin based, they could die.
Mm.
And that's on me. So that's where the training and the doing things over and over and over again come into play. However, there are also things known as training scars. So a training scar is doing something repeatedly wrong until it has dire consequences. So in the medical field, oh, I don't know, in the late 80s, we started doing simulation. So, and they have some $1 million simulation labs. Um, and the first time, and I thought, well, I know how to start an IV. I don't have to practice on an arm, a plastic arm. Well, why not? It's better than practicing on a real person and fucking it up,
Oh yeah.
you know. And so I went to a seminar once, and there was a physician who was running the center at University of Washington, and he said, in the medical field, we've always been from day one, see one, do one, teach one. So on my first day on the unit, I might see somebody do a procedure. The next day, I do that procedure. And the next day, I teach that procedure. Okay. But what if the one I saw was done wrong? And then I do 10 wrong and I teach 100 wrong. It's exponential. That's a training scar. And so that's why it's so vitally important to, once you learn a basic thing, to go back and review those basic things, because those basic things do save lives. I guarantee it.
I completely agree. I think I use that same method when it comes to bodybuilding. You're ripping on your muscle, you're filling up with good food, and then you're increasing your weight, or you're increasing the different, how difficult is the rep you're doing. Are you doing slow on the eccentric or the eccentric? There's how are you doing the same exercise every time? No wonder you're not seeing success. You have to change it up. You have to increase. You have to try new things. But that baseline of understanding how to properly squat,
right,
definitely matters. Your spine alignment matters.
Right.
Making sure your hips aren't sagging one way or another. That's going to destroy your lower back
Right.
in really fast as soon as you add some weight. Everything starts with the foundation. And if the foundation is strong, you can build that on that house and build on that house with fitness. And then also translates directly into how I deal with firearms. I wasn't I wasn't in the Marines. I wasn't in a one of these special forces units that trains with firearms so much that they can literally do it in any way, even with one arm, even when one arm disabled.
Right.
Like we've seen it. We've you definitely had to deal with people who have a great ability to use whatever limb they have to fight with.
Yeah.
That's how I try to deal with firearms, where I'm doing the reps upon the reps upon the reps upon the reps, 100 reps of every little thing, from pistol draws to reloading with my offhand. Everything has to be perfect. Every time I have to actuate my light, even if I'm not in low light scenarios, because it interrupts the OODA loop. All these things, these little details that we focus on, create the big picture.
Right.
And when you're dealing with anesthesiology or blunt force trauma, or a horrible laceration just to somebody's face, like completely external, not even cutting into the or shattering the bone or anything, just a nasty cut. Every detail matters.
Absolutely.
So how does this translate into what you do in today's day and age? So now you don't fix people's necessarily their physical wounds, but more the wounds in their soul, their heart, their brain. What I know you're part of the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation, and you are one of the directors for Warrior Path. Why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Okay, so I'm what's called a Warrior Path guide. I'm not the director of anything.
Well, you directed me to it. That's probably what I should say. So, that's what I should say. You're a guide.
So Warrior Path is a it's one of a kind. It's the only program anywhere in the country that does what we do, and it started in 2012 in Virginia. And there are now 9 and soon to be 10 locations around the country that teach Warrior Path. And irrespective of where a person goes, the curriculum is exactly the same. All of us Warrior Path guides have been trained to the exact same standard. So in my 44 years in military medicine, I never, ever, ever, ever wanted to be anything to be associated with psych mental health, because to me that's voodoo. And then when I went through the behavioral health program at Madigan, and I credit them with saving my life, or at least getting me back to where I could survive and cope, I felt like, okay, I'm good. And then I discovered Warrior Path in the summer of 2020, and I went to Warrior Path, the program in Virginia, in December of 2020. And I will tell you, Eddie, I cried every day at Warrior Path. And the first couple of days, it was crying because of, oh fuck, look what's happened to me. And the last 3 days, it was, oh my God, look where I'm going now. And so they changed the Tears of Joy. So and we just graduated another group yesterday. It was our 20th one here in Washington.
Mm,
And
congratulations.
I thank you. I told these 9 young men, I said, in my 44 years in military medicine, I know I saved thousands of lives. And I'm damn proud of everything that I did in military medicine. Now, having been a Warrior Path guide for 2 years, this is so much better than any day that I worked in military medicine, because now, instead of saving lives physically, as you alluded to, I'm saving lives mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And it's absolutely amazing that what the change that my wife has seen in me. Um, and I'll allude a little bit to one of the practices that we teach at Warrior Path is gratitude. And the first morning they're there, we do a module called Own the Morning. And part of that is gratitude. What are you grateful for? Well, we hand them a little 3x3 Post-it note, write on there what you're grateful for. And it's like coffee, I slept okay, that kind of stuff. I'm like, that's great. You're grateful for something. It's not all doom and gloom. And when life kicks you in the nuts every morning, you have two choices: your attitude and your effort. You can say, all right, fuck it, I'm going back to bed. Or you can kick life right back in the nuts and move on. And part of that is gratitude. So when I went to Warrior Path, I thought, oh, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm grateful. And at that time, I'd been married 27 years. I'm like, yeah, Deborah knows I'm grateful. Does she really? Have I told her that? Have I shown her that? So I got home from Warrior Path. I had to quarantine for 9 days because it was right in the middle of COVID. And one day I went to the store and I bought a stack of Post-it notes. And I wrote a note, put it on the mirror. And when she got home after the quarantine, she saw that note. And I've done that every day since for 2 years. And if I'm at Warrior Path, I send her a text. It says, "Good morning, love. I hope you have a great day." And if I'm home, it's like there's a note that says, "Thank you for dinner last night," or "Thanks for a wonderful evening," or "Thanks for going, you know, thanks for what you do for our parents," or whatever. Just little things like that. And that gratitude has been shown that if you practice gratitude every day for 21 days, physiologically, and people a lot smarter than me figured this out, physiologically in your brain, it's still measurable 6 months later, the positive effects of that. And so just being grateful for something. And so it comes back to you too. So the last time I left for Warrior Path, the morning I got up, there was a note on the mirror from my wife that said, "Go save lives." And for me, it's like, oh yeah, I get to save lives. And I get to show people I was where you are 2 years ago or 6 years ago or whatever. That's where I was. And right now, at 66 years of age, I am living my absolute best life because of Warrior Path and because of the people that I have that surround me at home.
I absolutely love that. I think there's something that can be said about finding your purpose.
Mhm.
And finding your purpose is a day-to-day operation, in my opinion. Right. In my opinion, you're usually right. I'm just gonna put that out there. No, I'm just sucking around. I really think finding your purpose every day is so important.
Right.
Yesterday, my purpose was be a better husband and capitalize on my mental health growth that I've made over the year, and also not let me processing the things that I've experienced in life carry over into harming my wife and our relationship. Because it's hard to talk to me sometimes when I have resting bitch face and I'm my hands are clenched and I'm looking staring at a wall while we're supposed to be having movie time.
Sure.
And I'm thinking about something that happened to me when I was deployed, or thinking about losing friends to suicide last year. I've never thought I'd experienced that. It's probably going to haunt me for a long time. The amount I've lost last year was astronomical compared to what I've experienced in life. I'm sure I'm not ready with that for like this to deal with that type of stuff. But as I learn to deal with it, it's essential that I am appreciative of her and her efforts to try, and I'm conscientious that she is trying, and not to let me be in a funk and have her think that it's her fault.
Right.
My partner's job is to support me. My happiness is not her responsibility, but she tries so fucking hard to make me happy. And if I don't practice gratitude,
Yeah.
I definitely can relate to that. I'm gonna
Right.
start. I'm gonna take a leaf out of your book. I'm gonna start practicing more gratitude as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and I think it's so vitally important. And we actually have a My Path app that's just Warrior Path alum, and I'll bet you 80% of the posts I see on there are gratitude.
Wow.
I'm grateful for, and I read every single post on there. It takes me 30 minutes every morning to read what people are posting, and it's kind of cool to be able to see that we're so grateful for the small things, because those small things grow into big things.
Yeah.
And that's perfect. And when you're grateful about something or someone, and you express that, it does come back to you. It might take a little while, but it does come back to you, and it pays dividends that are, I can't put my finger on how much I've gained just by that little post-it note.
Okay. So obviously, I'm not going to give any true stories that I've experienced of friends who've gone through Warrior Path or similar ways that didn't work out too well. I'm going to hopefully get them all to go to Warrior Path, because
Okay.
Lord knows they need it. And shit. I'm thinking some of my family members might need it too.
Mm-hmm.
If I came to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, I'm a vet. I got turned away from the VA because I have a service animal," or because I got mad at the security guard who called me an asshole after I bumped into him by accident, and I raised out, and now they think I'm crazy and they won't let me in the VA,
Right.
and I'm suicidal. I'm having suicidal ideations. I want to harm myself. I've never felt this low. I might lose my job. My wife's about to say it's going to leave me. My kids are scared to be around me because I'm having rage fits. I don't want to be angry. I'm just angry all the time.
Right.
What do I do? Please help me.
So there are a number of ways that Warrior Path can approach that. So the process is that you put in an application, and then we have one of our team recruiters calls you and reaches out to you and shares their story with you, and then here's your story. And so Warrior Path is basically six parts. One is that the trust and the connection is there. So we guarantee you that we don't record anything, we don't report back to your family, we don't talk to your primary care providers, we don't talk to your employers, we don't even care who those people are. We just want you to have better relationships with them. So the trust is there, and the connection, because you're going to sit in a class with 5 to 8 other guys who have similar concerns and similar conditions and similar questions that you do. So we bring anywhere from 5 to 9 people together, and we establish that trust and that connection from day one, from the time you arrive. It's positive, it's upbeat. So the trust and the connection runs through every single module we do. And so the course goes for 7 days. Actually starts on a Friday evening and ends on a Thursday morning. So it's 5 full days and a part of a day at the front and a part of the day at the back. And starting the first full morning, we're doing some PT, not busting your ass. It's just physical fitness for you, not to you.
Movement is life.
Absolutely. We do the gratitude. We talk about owning the morning and having a routine. And then, so the 5 phases that we go through of Warrior Path is, first is education. So the first morning we tell you what Warrior Path is all about and how it came about and why we do what we do. So you get the education, and throughout the entire week you get more education into how to communicate better with your loved ones, how to find your center, how to resolve all the shit in your not resolve it all, but at least come to grips with your past. So that's the education part of it. We also, the next part is regulation. So once you start feeling better about yourself, you can regulate, and we do that with meditation. We teach transcendental meditation. We do the gratitude. We do journaling. We do some horsemanship things. We do archery. We do a number of things, not every day. It's a little, we do 31 what we call wellness practices to help you regulate so that we do something that's heavy and we all share our story. And then we go outside and we punch holes in paper with arrows. And then we're back in doing some more heavy stuff. So it modulates like that. So something heavy, something emotional, and then something to help you feel better about yourself. So those are the wellness practices. So it's education, regulation, and then disclosure. And disclosure is where a lot of people get stuck because it's like an onion. You don't just chop that onion down the middle and hold it up and say, "Here I am, motherfucker."
Mm.
You do it layer by layer. And if I peel a layer back and I share something with you, then you may do the same for me. And then eventually we realize we're only as stuck as our secrets. If there's something I'm not going to tell you, I'm stuck. Right. So disclosure is huge. And it's not just disclosure about what you got, what trauma from Afghanistan or military sexual trauma or whatever it is that got you here. We look all the way back to your childhood. And there are some really, I don't want to say vicious, some vigorous aha moments. There was for me. I look back and I'm like, wow, he did that to me. And I had never thought about that. So telling your story and opening up is the third part. So there's the education, the regulation, the disclosure. Next is what we call story. And that's where you pick up that pen and you start writing your new story. And you turn the page that you've been writing on because that's where all the negative shit is, and you move to the next page. So story. And who knows what their story is going to be, but we give you the education and the wellness practices to help you write that better story. And then the last part is service. And we tell everybody that when you come out of Warrior Path, you are an expert guide. That doesn't mean you're standing at the front of the classroom teaching Warrior Path. It just means that you can go out and you can be your brothers and sisters keepers. Because the best person to help me through a difficult time is somebody that's been through that difficult time. And that's every warrior has been through a difficult time. So Warrior Path is not just combat warriors, combat veterans. It's also first responders, firefighters, police officers, corrections officers. And then we're starting to open it up to, because of COVID, ER and ICU nurses who have been through a hell of a trauma in the last few years. So those 5 aspects of it, and it continues to go. So I am still in the process of educating myself about post-traumatic growth, and I'm still in the process of developing my wellness practices. I went and bought a recurve bow and I shoot arrows as often as I can.
Awesome.
And I journal and I still do the gratitude and I walk and I try to work out. It doesn't always work out that way. I spend time in nature. I bought a big ass lens for my camera and I go out and I take pictures of birds. I never did that before. And I spend time listening to, if I buy a song on Amazon Music and I like it, I'll buy the rest of the album because there's some hidden gems on there. And so those are wellness practices for me that I developed because of Warrior Path. And I continue to disclose. Sitting down and sharing with you for me is disclosure. Mm-hmm. And my wife was a healthcare provider as well. She's retired, so she knows what I went through. But my son is a non-medical person in the Air Force. My daughter is a non-medical person in the Air Force. They don't want to hear the blood and the guts.
Yeah.
They just know that dad was fucked up for a while. And so I've disclosed all that to them in the parts that won't gross them out. And I've shared with them where I've been and how I've grown. And so it's a continual circle that I can now, when something happens, I can respond instead of reacting, instead of blowing up and losing my shit. I can take a deep breath. And we teach breathing techniques as well. There's a technique called 4-7-8 breathing, and it's you breathe in for 4, hold it for 7, exhale for 8. And if you do that 3 times, and let's just say each of those counts as 4 seconds, 7 seconds, 8 seconds, that's 57 seconds. If I do that for 57 seconds and you're yelling at me and I just stop and I do 3, 4, 7, 8, do you know how de-escalating that is? It's a thing of beauty. It's hard to imagine that, but just stopping and taking a deep breath can recenter, refocus, reground. So that's a lot of what we do at Warrior Path. And we watch people when they come in Friday night and their eyes are down and their face is pale and there's no color in their eyes. 7 days later, it's like they're on top of the world. And it's amazing. And statistically, there are psychologists and psychiatrists who have looked at our program, who are advisors to our program, who say this is the only program of its kind that teaches post-traumatic growth. Because I've done other things and it's like, okay, I go for a retreat for 3 to 5 days and I feel good about myself, but
come back and then you had a serious low.
Yeah, okay, now what?
Yeah.
Now what? And so Warrior Path is those 7 days, and then it's followed by 83 days of you sign on to the app. There's a 3 to 5 minute video every day. There's more lessons all the way through the 90 days. And this team of warriors that we just graduated yesterday, next Thursday, they'll have a Zoom call with one of the path guides. And then 2 weeks later, and then 3 weeks later. And so they have 6 calls over the course of 13 weeks. And I went through Warrior Path a year, 2 years, and a month ago. My brothers and I are still communicating. We still do Zooms about once a month. We send each other texts. A lot of times it's just, off-color jokes, but we are still a team.
Mm-hmm.
One of them called me the day after Christmas. He said, "Hey, I'm driving from Washington, D.C. back up to New York. Just thought I'd call and say hey." And we chatted for 45 minutes about everything and nothing.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who's a civil affairs officer in the Army Reserve who, other than Warrior Path, I would have never met him. But his traumas are here. Mine are here. I know this is no visual here. His traumas are somewhere off to my left and mine are somewhere right in front of me. But we have commonality because we stood up, we took an oath to protect and serve or to support and defend. And that gives us commonality. And that's a big part of Warrior Path is that I don't care if you're a firefighter. You are a warrior because of what you've seen, what you've done, and what you continue to do. And you're a police officer. So what if you never went to Afghanistan? You are a warrior, probably more of a warrior than I am because you do it every day. I did it for 183 days and then it was done. So we look at warriors as those who have lived through an event and come back to tell others about that event. That's what a warrior is. Awesome. And like I say, we've had Coast Guard people come through our program, and are they combatants? No, but they're rescue people.
And I know I make a lot of jokes. I make a lot of jokes about the branches, but but in all reality, there's nothing that is more inspiring to me than anyone signing their name up to do something positive for another human being.
Right.
I admire the even the Space Force. I admire anybody who does something to serve others.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I get along very good with people who are self-servant.
Yeah.
In a character trait for them,
right.
Self-serving all the time.
Right.
I really don't get along well with them, or egotistical. I'll try to crack jokes here and there to bring happiness and comedy to life, but there's nothing more inspiring to me than seeing somebody in a uniform, do their just wake up and go to do whatever they're doing.
Yep.
I can't even go on Facebook without getting all emotional because of the coming home videos that are just blasted through Facebook all the time, and it's a beautiful thing when our soldiers and sailors and Marines and coasties and airmen come home.
Mm-hmm.
But when they come home, they don't always come home mentally, and that is the most important part. Sometimes we hear about our superstars going out and going back for a fallen comrade.
Right.
There's that horrible, terrifying, heartbreaking picture on the internet of the Marines. 2 of them ran back to get their buddy, and both of them died trying to save him.
Right.
And that, moments like that, are healthy reminders of what service to sacrifice really means.
Right.
And that's the name. That's the name of the series that I'm doing right now, Service to Sacrifice. Right. And I wanted to talk about these great people that are emerging from your program because they go in and they're not them.
Right.
They're not who they see in the mirror.
Right.
They are I call it when I feel like that, when I feel super low and I like I've lost my way, I feel like a shell of a human being. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that they are, but I'm saying that I feel like a shell of a human being sometimes when I'm not working on how to heal, how to come home all the way.
Yeah.
You know, having your partner home can and not being completely mentally present can be heartbreaking for one,
Right.
for the spouse or the
Right.
partner, right?
Yeah.
And the kids.
Yep.
And it can really wear and tear.
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that my stepdad, I call my dad now, but he's seeking help. Him seeking
Good.
help is so great. Growing up, hearing him have nightmares and stuff, and
Right.
his experience in the Air Force are very strange because they're not like everybody else's.
Right.
So his unit's not nowhere near him. So I love that veterans are coming together,
Right.
regardless of the branch,
Yeah.
and finding commonality
Yeah.
and healing with your program.
Well, when I walked into Warrior Path, I had no idea what to expect. And I went to Virginia. They flew me across the country to Virginia because we weren't doing it out here yet. And I walked in there on Friday night, and I thought, I don't belong here. And I looked around, and I'm thinking, there's some tough mothers in this room.
Oh, yeah.
I don't belong here. And Saturday morning, we sit down and we're all telling our story, and I'm thinking, I'm just a medical guy. One of my Path brothers was the first responder on the scene at the Pentagon on 9/11. Um, one of them was a Marine who was 4 times deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, 2 combat engineers, and a Special Forces weapons sergeant. And I'm like, I'm not a warrior. I don't belong here. And then they went through the introduction to Warrior Path and talked about what a warrior is and what a hero is. And at lunchtime on that first day, I stood up and I said, "You're goddamn right. I'm a warrior. I do belong here."
Yeah.
And I had that shift. And it's just like once I made that shift to say, I'm not just a medic, because those guys would not have gone to war without me, and I wouldn't need to be there without them.
Otherwise, it
So
would just
there's
be the
that.
Civil War all over again.
Yeah. So there's that commonality. Um, so that the fifth thing I talked about was service, and going out and being your brother and sister's keepers and finding volunteer things. 2 things I do as a volunteer. I volunteer at Tahoma National Cemetery every Tuesday. If I'm not in Warrior Path, I'm out there and I'm interacting with people who have lost loved ones, and I get to witness veteran burials, and I get to read stories, and I get to interact with the public, and it helps me feel really good that I'm paying it forward. And then I also work with the Puget Sound Honor Flight, where I go as a medical person and we take 50-ish, used to be mostly World War II, but there's very few of them left. But World War II, Korean War, and Vietnam veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the memorials made for them. And I've met some absolutely amazing people. I met some chosen reservoir survivors from Korea, Pearl Harbor survivors, Battle of the Bulge soldiers, met a couple of Medal of Honor recipients. And on the last trip I went on, one of my fellow medical guys is a paramedic from Olympia. And I introduced myself, and he said, "What kind of work do you do?" And I said, "Well, I'm retired, but this is what I do in Warrior Path." And he said, "I think my nephew could benefit from your course." I said, "Here's the link, and that's my job. I've done my job. Now he needs to apply, and then we will embrace him fully. But until he hits that submit button, it's information only." So he came through the program, and I want to read to you what his uncle said to me after the program, 2 days after the program. He said, "Not sure how you guys do it in such a short time. He reminds me of him before he was deployed. I'm speechless. He's motivated, articulate, and educated regarding mental health. He's literally like his old self. Not sure my family could have gotten a better gift. Thank you."
Wow.
Yeah. That right there, I mean, that's the motivation for me to keep going. Because yesterday when I got home, I was dog tired. And typically when I get home from 8 days out in the woods in Port Orchard, I get home and I sit down on the couch. I think I'll just take a 15-minute nap. And 6 hours later, I wake up and go to bed. It's for me, it's emotionally, physically draining in a wonderful, absolutely wonderful way, because I get to see that aha, and I get to see people say, "You know what? I am worthy. I am good. All that shit in my past. And we use a rear view mirror analogy where we say, you drive off the car lot in a brand new F-150 Raptor, and you got that 3 foot by 5 foot windshield in front of you, and that's your life all in front of you. And you got this little, 3 inch by 8 inch rear view mirror. And if you keep looking in that, you're going to run smack the fuck into something
Yeah, you will.
because you're living in the past. And so we tell them the rear view mirror is for reference, not residence. And making that shift is amazing. I had a guy come through recently who was a wolf trainer in Colorado. And when I talked to him a couple of days ago, I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "If I had a tail, I'd wag it."
I love it.
And when he came to the program, he was the guy looking down, not making eye contact, shoulders slumped, not eating, not sleeping. And 7 days later, he's like, "If I had a tail, I'd wag it."
I love it.
I just think that's a cool transition to see.
Your program is literally breathing life into people.
Right.
And that's what I'm not gonna say his name. I want to say his name really bad, but I'm trying to be respectful of his experiences. But seeing him come back, he showed up at our weekly, vet workout meeting thing, and watching him walk through the door, he unrecognizable,
Good.
completely unrecognizable.
Cool.
He's smiling.
Yeah.
Not a fake smile, not a nervous tick smile, not a I'm hurting and I don't want anyone to know smile, a real smile. And his dog sprinted across the room and dove into his arms, and he just collapsed, like hugging his dog. It was licking his face.
Yeah.
He couldn't even stand up. The dog was just laying on him, licking his face.
So the dog recognized somebody new too.
Yeah. The dog was separated him.
Yeah.
One of our vet brothers kind of took him in.
Yeah.
For
the week that he was there.
Yeah, and it was a beautiful moment. And afterwards, still to see him, he acts brand new now.
Yeah.
There's life, there's happiness, there's appreciation for another chance to wake up and do something special for other people, not just himself. And I love that.
One of the things that we tell people when they get there, this is training. And as warriors, we understand training because a new weapon system comes out, a new medication that you have to use, a new office system, whatever. We're always being trained. Train. And you make that edge even sharper every time you get trained. We are not therapy, and we are not treatment. We are training. And every warrior can understand training. And I think that's one of the things that appealed to me. And then we tell them on day 7, what we told these 9 young men yesterday morning, that life is not hard, but it is hard work. And you have to do the work, and you have to do it with intentionality, because 7 days here, okay, perfect. You're 7 days closer to where you were. But what happens if you stop? You're going to fall right back to the same shit you've been doing. And the question I always ask people when you show up at Warrior Path is, so what have you been doing? Okay, how's that been working for you? Because you wouldn't be at Warrior Path if what you were doing was working. And then one of my favorite sayings, and I have no idea who said this, is if you always do what you always did, you'll always get what you always got. Absolutely. So if you keep going back to the same shit, diving into the bottle, self-medicating, yelling at other people, flying off the handle, how's that working for you?
You're just chasing dragons.
Absolutely.
It's always difficult for me to try to understand why people choose certain coping methods. For me, coping with anything I've ever dealt with in life has always been, okay, let's try to find another solution. The troubleshoot method is what I've been told that I have. And if it's not the troubleshoot method, it's okay, look around you to other people. What are they doing? What are they failing at? Right. How can we improve this and work together as a team to kind of solve it? You don't always get those same options when you're dealing with something that happened to you that you aren't ready to deal with, that you think you're not ready to deal with,
right?
Just because you don't think you have the right tools.
Right.
But when you have the right tools and you're using a 9/16 wrench instead of channel locks, you're not going to cut the next person's not going to cut his hands on the bolt when they're trying to rip it apart. Different things need different tools. I think that the term PTSD has been associated with our veterans in our country for far too long, and it's time for different organizations and foundations and programs that do work to be the forefront of how we deal with people having post-traumatic stress disorder.
Right.
Something's changed.
Right.
And I think since you were able to witness the change over the years in the military, it wasn't just, all right, this person's a pussy. Now it's, oh shit, we have a serious issue.
Right.
And the people, the old heads that are sitting in the government offices while 4 sailors killed themselves in a weekend, and one right down the street on the TR, and people I deployed committing suicide rapidly across the United States Navy, and it's all over the news. What's going on? Why is it going on?
Right.
I think we need to find different approaches to deal with it. I really like yours and the people you're working with as well.
I think there are tons of programs out there, and mine is the best. I'll say that right up front. But you have to be ready to go to it. So I've done things with other organizations, and there wasn't any follow-up, even from the VA. Bless their heart, they do the best they can. But how many people at the VA that I've talked to have actually been there and done what I did? So when I went for my first mental health evaluation at the VA, I saw a psychiatrist, and he said, "So, what did you do in Afghanistan?" I said, "Well, I did anesthesia." And he said, "And what do you do here?" I said, "I do anesthesia." So he sits back at his desk and he rubs his chin and he says, "Well, I could go to Afghanistan and sit at a desk such as this and see patients." Totally uncharacteristic for me. I stood up, leaned on his desk, and I said, "I didn't sit at a fucking desk in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
I saved lives. I saw lots of blood. And I'm having nightmares." And so he does a couple of backspaces on his computer and retypes some stuff. And I thought, that's totally not me. But I didn't want to be put into a box with other people. I wanted to be seen as an individual. And there's an eminent psychiatrist named Vikram Patel, and he says that mental health is too important to be left to mental health professionals alone. So what that tells me is that you and I can be mental health professionals, can be mental health counselors, not professionals, but you and I can help each other's mental health. And I can help the next guy. And the guy that you said that came back after Warrior Path, he can then go help other people. And because I've been through it, I can help other people through it. I don't have to be a mental health professional. And then one of the advisors to the entire program is a guy named Brett Moore. He's the Army. He's a retired Army psychologist, and he was the most deployed psychologist in the U.S. military history. He says that mental health professionals have only been around for about 100 years. So what happened before 100 years? It was you and me. It was you and me sitting down and talking, or whatever diversions we need to have. That's who was helping mental health. That's you and me. We can help people who are struggling, people who are suffering. We can help them because we've been there.
Authentic, peer-to-peer support, decompression.
Absolutely. Authenticity, trust, and connection.
I love it. I love it. Well, I really do love what you're doing with Warrior Path, and I appreciate you sharing your story. It's hard to have these conversations sometimes, because it reminds me of that I still have so much more I can bring to the world. Even when I am putting myself in a box, as you brought up, and say, okay, I'm just going to do this one thing, or I'm just going to reach out to this many organizations, or I'm going to try to share these many stories, or I'm going to talk to as many people as possible at work, randomly walking by me, and ignore what I'm doing, just because I want to have more human interaction. I really love the fact that service doesn't have to end just because your career is over. And I love that you continue service post it.
Thank you. Can I add one more thing?
Please do.
We say at the end of Warrior Path is to these guys is, do not let your military or first responder service be the last great thing you do.
I think that's the key to life.
Absolutely.
Post service.
Yep.
Once we're able to identify who we need to be afterwards, I think but finding that out can take time. And I think that with Warrior Path, with just having great conversations between different people, we can figure out this mental health issue that we're facing just for the vets. I can't speak for the whole world. I don't know what it's like to be everybody else. I know what it's like to sit in a room with vets, talk about the shit they experience.
but veterans and warriors are not the only ones suffering. And statistically, the world, the U.S. in the last 3 years is seeing a 30-year high in suicides.
Yes.
And I heard this on a church podcast the other day that 45% of adults in the state of Washington are under mental health care. 45%. That to me is it's unfathomable that I could walk into a room with 100 people and say, "You 45 right there, those are the ones." How do you know? It's just amazing to me that, and amazing in not like wow amazing, but like holy shit amazing. How did we get here? How did we get to this, where we've seen suicides at a 30-year high, and we've seen mental health issues at a 30-year high, and a lot of it is COVID. I get it, but COVID also did a lot for the veteran community, because when they said, "Okay, time to isolate," we're like, "Hold my beer, watch this." We isolate with the best of them.
I know that's right. Yeah, isolation is something that we do. We clam up, we hermit crab when things are wrong,
right?
Because we're not able to attack the situation,
right?
And that's something that I experienced with me and my other people who have served. It's a commonality that we've been able to find. Is I asked my buddy this last week. I said, "Why don't you ever reach out, bro? Like I'm always worried about you. I'm always reaching out to you because I don't know, man. I'm just going through a tough time." And like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah,
no shit. You're isolating yourself.
And that's the best time to reach out, is when you're going through a tough time.
Yes, if you feel uncomfortable, you're unhappy with certain situations, talk to somebody. I always remind my friends when I call them, say, you don't always have to say good when I ask how the fuck you are, right?
Yeah.
And they laugh, and then they think about it, and then every now and then there's a time where they say, "You know what, you're absolutely right, man. What are you doing tomorrow?" And so I usually have to work, but after work, let's meet up, let's talk, let's figure out this life thing.
Thank you.
We're not supposed to be perfect.
Yeah, thank you for doing that.
Yeah, we can all look out for each other.
Absolutely.
And I haven't operated on anybody. I haven't, done amazing life-altering medical procedures on human beings. But you know what? I've had an opportunity to tell my friend that I love them, and been able to intervene and find out why they want to kill themselves.
Yeah.
I've had times where people hear an episode and they reach out and they say, "Man, I'm really not doing too hot. I don't know who else to talk to. I can't even talk to my family." I said, "You know what? It's because you don't allow yourself to trust them.
Yeah.
A lot of the time.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised. Everyone will be surprised when they reach out and talk. Shit. Like I'm not gonna eat my words this time, because I just did that last week with my wife. And wow, to be able to be on common ground with somebody when you're struggling with, losing your father while you're deployed, or like just last year, dealing with a lot of veteran suicide, and my friend committed suicide, and losing my brother to a DUI. I'm able to, be saved because I hit that button on the pressure cooker, let off some of that steam.
There you go.
You got to do it. You got to take a knee sometimes and breathe.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, just kind of my last question, and it's something that I try to ask everybody on for this series, because the series is called Service and Sacrifice. When I say the word service and sacrifice to you, what does that mean to you personally?
Service is about working for and with others, and using my God-given talents and honed over the years talents to help others, whether it's what you and I are doing right now, whether it's Warrior Path, whether it's going into the operating room and saving a life. That's what service is. For me, sacrifice is going above and beyond. And I'm a firm believer that nobody can give 110%. I can give 100%, but I can't give 110%. It's just not possible. But the sacrifice is, as an example, there were 5 days in Afghanistan where my 4 anesthesia partners and I worked in the operating room for more than 24 hours straight. That to me is sacrifice. I didn't eat. I grabbed a urinal and peed in the corner of the operating room, went right back to what I was doing. Didn't sleep. And to me, that's sacrifice. And knowing that my family was back here while I was in Afghanistan trying to save lives and stay alive, they were here coping without me. That is sacrifice, because my wife now is handling the bills, the kids, taking care of the house, taking care of the pets, taking care of my mom. That is sacrifice. So while I'm serving, other people are sacrificing.
I love it. I love it. That's exactly the answer that I couldn't articulate as well, because we've had different experiences.
Right.
But that's the same way I feel about it as well. My wife was such a rock for me, and she's more than just my wife. I think that the title of wife can be overplayed and used and misused by pieces of shit from time to time. I think she's my partner, my life, my best friend, my confidant, my hero, my absolute hero, the wind beneath my wings in moments when I'm flying and when she's flying. I hope that I'm not the gravity beneath hers, but you know what? Sometimes I'm the gravity up in this bitch.
Well, when I meditate, I combine my twice daily prayers with my twice daily meditation, and I thank God for Deborah in my life and the gift that she is to me, and it's an acronym, real. She's my rock, my everything, my angel, and my love.
It's so true.
And then I've thrown other things in there. She's my rock, my reality, my love, my life. It's just I can't. And by the way, we met during Desert Storm in the Persian Gulf. We were both Navy nurses. So she's lived through service. She's lived through sacrifice as well. And we are one and the same in our approach to service and sacrifice and how we interact with our kids and our parents. And I don't know. I don't know where my life would be right now without her, because I think you're right. She's not my wife. She is my life.
I love that. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing not just your personal experience, but also the tough ones too. It's not easy ever to start talking about tough shit.
Yeah.
But over the years, as you learn to process traumatic experiences and find the lessons in them, I think it has become easier for me. I'm not going to speak for you, but I appreciate your perspective as well.
Well, thank you
so much. And thank you for taking the time to do this. I love Warrior Path. I love what it does. I love the fact that my friend does not feel like he doesn't have an option anymore to live or to and he has to take his own life. He's here. He's living life. He's thriving, and he's looking at his first career. I absolutely love that. Good. And I love it for more than the reasons it's just about him, because he's affecting other people in such a positive way. Myself, I'm going to be referring my friends to Warrior Path. And I think it's an important thing to find something that we can all gravitate towards, and healing is something that we can start with.
Well, I think there's a statistic out there. If you live for so many years, in your lifetime, you will impact 500 other people. Why not make that a positive impact? Because then that goes exponentially as well. If you influence somebody negatively, that's going to be a negative influence, and that ripple becomes a tidal wave. But small ripples, small, one step at a time, is how we get through this.
That's definitely true. And I'm going to do my best to emulate the lessons that I've learned from you today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Everybody, this has been another episode of Off the Deep End Podcast. I hope you gained from it as much as I did. So I'm going to be posting the links in the description to check out the Permission to Start Dreaming Foundation and what Warrior Path is all about. I'm super excited to share it, and hopefully that you can share this episode with somebody so that they can hear what it's about and kind of maybe take that first step towards healing. It's never easy to get started when you want to change your life. All it takes is that first step, and then building on that with proper support, and you can be that for your friends. I hope that you will do the same thing that I'm going to be doing with this. And thank you so much for, as always, headed over to the Facebook comments and on my Facebook page to let me know what you think about the episode. The conversations that we're having here are meant to inspire others to effect more change in others. So thank you so much for your time. Much love, y'all. Stay blessed.